And part of that tends to be a strong aversion to having one thing considered at a given rank to evolve into something else at that same rank. And so you tend to demote or promote categories rather than having them go together. As an example, the acanthocephalin worm over there, it's one of the many good reasons not to eat raw meat, parasite. And it turns out there are a few morphological connections and a lot of genetic evidence that suggests that they actually derive from the rotifers, which is a standard group of small things that swim or crawl or sit around in ponds and settings like that. And so rather than say phylum Acanthocephala evolved from the rotifers, what people strong cladistic classification say is acanthocephalins get demoted down into a class of rotifers. Similar issues exist. Whales evidently deriving from hoofed mammals. So the people taking this view don't want to say they're both categories at the same level. You need to make whales just a subgroup of the hoofed mammals, or all the stuff about birds just being dinosaurs. Well, they look a lot different. I think it's useful to call them different things, even if they're closely related, but saying birds are just a kind of dinosaur reflects this wanting to classify things at a given level. And some people even don't use the categories at all of orders and families and things like that. And then overall, the naming of higher categories is basically by hindsight. We see this group of things and we figure, hey, let's give that a name. And so to know whether anything happening today is the evolution of a new higher category, we pretty much would have to wait a few million years or whatever and see if it went anywhere. And if it did, then we would trace back and say, hey, this is the start of that. But at this point, we don't have any way of knowing what's going to go anywhere, what doesn't. So overall, both the just hierarchical categories that we use and the nature of fossil record means under any scenario, we tend to expect to see the larger categories appearing on average earlier than the lower categories. And there are some additional evolutionary reasons that you'd expect that. So again, this obviously I'm not proving a whole lot, just that this particular pattern is not a good argument against evolution, and just in general trying to think about how to be careful thinking through the ideas and apologetics. You have a lot of folks picking up something and kind of running off with it, and I think as a group we can help a lot in trying to give more careful scientific backing to the arguments being used. So, thank you. Well, that's very much a general problem. How do you deal with a discrepancy in ideas on classifying things? And part of this, some people want to make lots and lots of categories, and some want to use fewer. Some people want to recognize more at a given level than others. So, and in general, in evolutionary context, people generally say that these higher categories are more our construct rather than entirely inherent natural categories. So there is definitely an arbitrariness of where you put things, and so to me the best thing is, are you being consistent? Now if you say that this group belongs at this level, well then an equivalent group probably should go at the same level. Basically, it's the problem of deciding what is the key features to use in making the category, or evolutionarily referring to recognizing homology versus convergence or some other factor. And basically it's just a matter of having to go through, see what multiple lines of evidence and weighing the balance on things. And it can be very complicated in deciding. Sometimes it gets pretty obvious as you go on that there's external thing. Another factor is whether, like in the case of, say, marsupial wolf and a standard wolf, well, they're both having a very similar lifestyle, so there would be reasons to expect some degree of parallelism starting from different places, whereas some other feature, say, young being kept in pouch, are not as obvious how that would tie in, and so there are some ways like that you can use to decide between them.
Any more questions?
Well, there are a number of ideas on it, and so there are several possible explanations and not something that's really definitely pinned down as this is the one. So, for example, one thing that I talked a little about here, the level of competition limiting things. Roger Thomas has done some modeling of kind of what different possible shapes could you have organisms being. And it seems like at that very broad level that he examined things, pretty much all the categories that anything has ever successfully done were already occupied by the end of the Cambrian. And so it does seem as though there were more opportunities open at that point, and they've kind of been filled since then. So that's one factor. Another possibility is some degree of key innovations coming in. There were both environmental and features of organisms, like improved sensory features, hard parts, things like that, that really develop and would tend to open up a lot of new possibilities there. Another possibility is a degree of change in genetic flexibility, starting from pretty variable, and then as competition, things like that increase, again, it tends to become more advantageous to not vary so much, instead specialize in on particular factors. There are a number of types of ideas out there. I don't know that any one, and probably more than one factor, is involved there, but explanations exist. Pinning down roles of relative importance of any one, I don't think has been achieved yet.
Okay, we should probably pause there. The next David up.